Okay. Okay. All right. Great. So we'll get started. So we're going to jump and we'll backfill, but we're going to jump to the fifth Perek of Pirkei Avot, the fifth chapter, to the seventh Mishnah, just to talk about a couple of ideas, important ideas, I believe, on how a person should carry himself or herself. And really, the reason I jumped to this is because I was inspired by a text message exchange that I had with someone a couple of days ago, and I'll tell you about that at the end. But that's what really inspired me to want to teach this tonight, to share it with you tonight. So the Perek of Tehillim starts out, the Mishnah of Tehillim, of Pirkei Avot, starts out with identifying certain types of people. So let's get those types of people locked in. First type of person that the Mishnah identifies is someone called a golem. A golem is what we would envision as a very primitive man, a person who's not quite complete, where from the outside you have a sense that the person is a human being, but it's raw, it's unpolished, unfinished. So the Mishnah starts by saying that there's such a thing called a golem. Okay? Then the Mishnah continues and says there's another type of person called an Am Haaretz. What is an Am Haaretz? Am Haaretz is a regular type of person whose midot, whose character traits are very good, but who doesn't know a lot of Torah. That's your second type of person. Third type of person is a Chacham. The Chacham has very good midot, very good character traits, and knows Torah, so puts it all together. And the last type of person, the fifth on the list, fourth on the list, is the Hasid. And the Hasid is someone who has the Torah, has knowledge in Torah, has good midot, good character traits, and pushes his midot beyond the breadth of Torah. In other words, if the Torah would say you have to do X, the Hasid, and we've talked about this before, the Hasid is a person whose midot, whose character traits are so sensitive and so refined that he'll push his character traits beyond the Torah value. So if the Torah says you have to do X, he'll go beyond X. So just to recap quickly, you have that primitive man who knows very little, is very unfinished, very raw. Okay, hard to identify that type of person in practical life. You have the Am Haaretz, who's a person who has good quality midot, but doesn't know a lot of Torah. Then you have the Chacham, who has good quality midot, meaning good characteristics, and has a lot of Torah. And then the Hasid, who again has good characteristics, has Torah, but in his case, his character traits will go beyond what the Torah mandates. Good. So that's what Harambam Maimonides does to introduce this Mishnah. He tells us that we, generally speaking, overgeneralization, we have these four types of people in Judaism. Good. Then he says there are a handful of things that the Chacham will do that other people might not catch. And this is what I wanted to focus to tonight. Those handful of things that the author of the Mishnah says the Chacham will do and others may not. From our perspective, these are things that many of us do. I want to remind us of some of them because they're sensitive and they're important and they're subtle and they're not big headline items. but they're important in terms of how a person carries himself and how he interacts with his family members and friends.
Ricky, the Chacham or the Hasid?
This is the Chacham. Beautiful.
The Chacham, okay.
This is the Chacham. Beautiful. We don't even have to go as far as the Hasid here. Perfect. Very important. And everybody on this call, from my perspective, can and should fit into this category based on these behavior traits that we'll talk about now. Okay. First thing that is mentioned, lo medaber b'fnei mi shegadol mimenu b'chokhma u'b'minyan. He says the first trait of a chacham, of a wise person, is that he or she will be very reticent to speak in the presence of someone who knows more and who is older, So let's take a step back. We're sitting in a room with a bunch of people, maybe with a parent, God willing, if our parents are still alive, God willing, or an aunt or an uncle, or an older business associate, older partner. The perspective of Pirkei Avot is, if that person is in the room and he's speaking, he should be the focus of attention, or she. And a person should train himself to be the listener in that case. Now, if you think about it with our children, for example, we live in America, and as we've said many times, America is a great, great country, maybe the greatest country in the history of the world until now. But there are certain mores or practices in Western culture that are part of American culture that are not part of Jewish culture. And one of them is this flattening, this leveling of the playing field, where an older person is not revered enough, where in fact, younger people are revered and younger people are emphasized, their input and their energy and their focus. In Judaism, it's completely the opposite. In Judaism, it's the older person who is revered, and the younger person should think long and hard before even speaking when the older person is there and in the room addressing. Now, in terms of our own behavior, most of us are at a point in our lives where we understand something like this, where we appreciate it. And because we're in a mature stage of adulthood, but not in an elder state of adulthood, we're at a sensitive point where we can greatly value that which we hear and the presence of people older than us. We can also very much appreciate where we are in life, that we've earned a certain level of respect, of attentiveness, of quietude on behalf of the other people in the room. And for us, I believe there are two important things here. One is that when there are people more senior to us in a conversation, of course, we defer to them. Of course we do. And we only speak if they asked us to speak. That's really the way the Torah looks at it. At the same time, we need to be teaching our children this, because they come from a very American perspective, not a very Torah-oriented perspective in this sense. So over time, we need to sensitize our children to the fact of grandpa's speaking, dad is speaking, Uncle X is speaking, and when that person is speaking, you don't. So it's a dramatic cultural digression from where we are, because again, in this country, it's inverted. Youth is revered more than age. But from a Torah perspective, that's not the case at all. How do we achieve this? I believe we achieve it by referencing and behaving based on something said in one of the other Mishnayot, which is siyag l'chokhmah shtika, which means that the boundary, the defining element of knowledge, of intelligence, of a knowledgeable person is quietude. What does that mean? It means a person doesn't have to force himself on others. He doesn't have to force himself to speak. So if a person, an older person, someone like us vis-a-vis our children, or maybe vis-a-vis our younger business associates or partners, if we speak and then are silent, if we're being spoken over, then maybe over time, after a handful of conversations, people will begin to realize that, you know what? Look who's in the room, and there has to be a different perspective. I believe that forcing it and overly pushing it and saying, oh, I'm the father of the family, I'm the CEO of the company, whatever I might be, in our culture here is very, very difficult to change perspectives. I believe that the way to change the perspective is to go the other way, to say very little, and to speak short, well-thought, considered points, and then not to speak. And I think over time, that will begin to build a sensitivity in other people in terms of how they should reference a person who has greater knowledge or greater years on the planet. Okay, so far? Thoughts, questions? Everybody cool with that? Okay. Another basic point, Joe?
Yeah, it is particularly difficult since the playing field is really tilted the other way.
Right.
And it's not so much that the culture thinks that younger is better. It's more so even that the culture is younger. You know, like there's for example, I'm not to point out the obvious one, which is technology, but technology is really taken over so many different parts of our lives, businesses and lives, and we're just not as good.
That's right.
You know?
Very good. And so here's where we have to draw the lines. We have to draw the lines. You know, my joke is vis-a-vis technology that I was born a generation too early. And I'm not going to accept a snicker or a this or a that in terms of my ability to get on this venue or that feed or this or that thing. I'm not going to accept it. It's unacceptable to me. And it has to be unacceptable to us because every generation, when it gets to our stage of life, is confronted with something completely foreign. I don't know, I don't remember what it was in terms of our parents, but there was a time when we were in our 20s, late 20s, 30s, and our parents were in their 50s and 60s and whatever. And there was a certain new X on the planet, because there always is, that they couldn't do as well as we could. So if they allowed us to respect them less as a result of that, then we're going to respect them less. But we have to pull back. This is not allowed. It's cute. Technology is cute. But you know what? You're the one that lives in that technology world. Get it set up. But technology, the lack of knowledge vis-a-vis technology or whatever it might be, can't be used and to allow you to second guess who I am to you. And that's important. But you're absolutely right. That's where it happens. Good?
I think it was the VCR, Ricky.
What's that? All right.
Program the VCR.
I was going to say that.
I think you're
I was
right.
going to say that it was the VCR.
Yeah.
I just held back, and also
Alan,
just
I
getting a
think
computer,
you're right.
getting a computer in general too.
Yeah,
like for
great
the business,
job. Right.
putting a computer into our business was a big deal for my dad.
There you go. Right. That's right. That's right. I remember that as well. When we computerized as well. Right. It's true. It's true. So here you go. So
You know what, Ricky? You're absolutely right, because in every generation, I don't remember what it was.
Every generation. There has to be, because that's the mahalach. That's the
Right.
way of the world. It has to be. And this exact point has to be challenged. It has to be challenged. And the ones who will win this battle or lose it are us, based on what we demand of our children. Ad kan, up till here. That's it. That's it. And you know, we're going to talk in the end about some of the ways to do this, but this is first point. Let's keep going. The second thing that the rabbi brings up is Eino nichnas letoch divrei chavero. So my father, alav shalom, was a southerner, and he mastered this. What is this? That you have to let a person finish his question completely, pause, think about it, and then answer. Southerners, many of you I'm sure do business with Southerners, they have that tendency, or at least they did. We, New Yorkers and people like us, we listen to the beginning of the question. We have a sense of where the question is going. We oftentimes interrupt the question, answering what we believe the question will be. From the perspective of nimus, from the perspective of a person having the right midot and the right level of Torah behavior, the rabbi writes that Eino nichnas lidvei chavero. Don't step in. Have the self-control to listen to the point completely. We've mentioned before in some of our classes that the spoken word is 10% of what's communicated, right? We know that. That's fact. You want to stretch it and say it's 15% of what the person intends to communicate. It's not more. Tone, facial expression, body language, breathing, all of that make up the complete message. So the rabbi writes, the only way we can understand the question is to hear it in full, pause, consider the words, the tone, the facial expression, who the individual is, the overall context of the conversation, and then answer the question. Another challenging one, but it's a different person. And the rabbi says that the person who works this kind of thing and ultimately masters it is on the level of the Chacham more than the opposite. Questions, thoughts? Good. He adds to the end of that point, Eino nivhal lahashiv. So what is he doing? He's saying that a person has to listen to the question completely or the comment, right? We're always cutting in. We always cut in. I do it too. We all do it. Listen to the comment, and the rabbi adds at the end of this suggestion that don't be nivhal lahashiv, meaning, did you step back and think about the person's circumstances? Are you carefully weighing enough the context of the situation? Did you think about what went on in his life last week or yesterday? If you didn't consider all those things, you haven't heard what the person said, and you shouldn't be answering. Eino nivhal lahashiv. Don't be bahul. Don't be quick. Don't jump. So first he says, don't interrupt. And then he goes one step further and he says, okay, you didn't interrupt, great. Take a couple of seconds. Think about it. Weigh who the person is. Understand what they're really asking you. We know as parents that most of the words that our children speak to us to say something have nothing to do with what they need from us. We know that. It's a typical thing with children. I say X, and the meta message, the real ask, the real expression, whether it be positive or otherwise, is overwhelmingly not the words that are being spoken. So if I cut the person off mid-sentence, the chances of me figuring out the real meaning are that much harder. And what the rabbi recommends is go to the end, question or statement, pause, put it into the broadest context as it relates to this child, person, whomever it might be. I think it's particularly cogent when it comes to children. And then answer. Then answer. You know, I think we've experienced it, some of us, when we want to call back a text message or a WhatsApp message. We want to call it back. I know there have been those that I've wanted to call back, and I try to delete it, but then sometimes I can delete it for everyone, and sometimes I can't, because it's too late. The other person saw it already. So I think we've all experienced this, and we understand that that extra pause has great value. So that's the second point that's being highlighted, that distinguishes a chacham from someone who is a lesser person. Then he suggests something else that's very nice. Let's say that a question was a multifaceted question, right? Let's say a child or a friend or a business associate really mentioned 2 or 3 things in the gist of that one question. What do you do? Right? The question had 3 questions in it. So he writes, the rabbi writes, what people will tend to do is answer that which is most convenient first. Answer that which is most convenient first. The one that he can answer most easily, answer that first. The rabbi says, not at all, not at all. The first answer should be that which sets the platform for everything that follows. So let's assume a child came with a question. You know what, mom and dad, I'd like to purchase this apartment or purchase this house or whatever it might be. And such are the details. And this is what we like about it. And this is what we're concerned about with the purchase.
How much do you need?
Right. We didn't get to that yet. That's question number 2. You see, Alan, you jumped at the end there.
Jumped it. That's the question I answer first.
Yeah, there you go. That's the question you pull out first, you answer it. Okay, so I'm glad you're at the class, because what we want to try and build is, okay, one second. Let's take a step back. What attracts them to this house? What makes this something that they think is interesting to them? What needs are they expressing right now? Is there anything unrealistic in the expression? Forget about the dollars and cents for a minute. We didn't get to that yet. Is there a particular type of bias? Is it who's selling it? Is it a need to feel more accomplished than the child might feel at this point based on his or her business successes? So first, before we look at the building, 1, 2, 3, 4 East 5th Street, whatever it might be, we want to take a step back and say, what is my child's need here? If it's him and his wife, let's say, what are they talking to me about? What are they expressing? What are they wanting? What are they hoping for at this stage in their life that from their context right now looks like it should be a house? Maybe it should. Maybe it shouldn't be anything like that. But they can't figure that out. And the point isn't to shoot the idea down. The point is to drill a little bit deep, to get to the meta message, and you all do it, and you've all done it 100 times or more, and to say, okay, the conversation on the surface is about X, but the real conversation is not about X at all. And the only way you could do that is by listening, prioritizing in our minds each of the points that the child, that the partner, that the spouse raised, addressing them from the perspective of what is the point based on which everything else stands? What is the foundational point of this question? What is the point based on which everything stands? It's a giant perspective. Let me think about it. Okay, what everything stands on here is a particular interest. Doesn't have to be a need. It could be something only very positive. It's all positive, right? But they're expressing a particular interest. They're expressing a particular orientation. It's coming from a place of excitement. Good, beautiful. Maybe coming from a place of insecurity. Might be both. But to the extent that I can drill deep and get to the underlying issue and make that the first question I respond to, then I build from there. And that takes a very good ability to listen, not thinking about the answer to the question as they're answering it, completely focusing on them and not focusing on my response, whether it be,
I love it.
Yeah.
It's not about what you're thinking. You want to know what they're thinking and what their desires are. I love it.
Beautiful, Lisa, beautiful. And we're not trained to do that. We're so trained because we're smart and we're quick and we're intuitive and we know our children and we've been through a lot of it already. So quick to jump in and answer and cut off. And I know where you're going. I know where you're going with this. I've been there. I did it 6 times. 1 second, honey. You could have done it 26 times. But the reality is I'm a different person and I've got my own needs here. So listen very, very carefully and let's clear our minds of the answer. I know for me, it's a giant challenge. It's a giant challenge. I consider myself somewhat intuitive. I have pretty good listening skills. So I'm very quick to offer something. It's not right. Not right. Invariably, the more I listen, the answer becomes many times more cogent, many times more appropriate. And the rabbi nuances the second point by telling us to listen and hear by saying there are typically several questions within a question. Seek out the most intrinsic, the most fundamental, and answer that one first, and then build everything on that. Fabulous. Anybody have an example? What would you use as an example to this?
Who do you?
What, anybody? Yeah, you.
Lisa, if you have one.
I think that even in a situation where couples are challenged and they're going through a difficult time, and people are quick to jump and to offer and you should and you should and you should, but to hear each person's perspective with an intelligent person, that's really the right way. Not giving advice and all that business.
I love it.
It takes a lot of thought process. And by the way, as the intelligent person or the chacham, they could be learning as well, because it's a challenge to really pick the right answer.
That's
to pick
great.
not the answer, the question.
There are several answers.
To build a foundation, exactly.
There's no real right answer to
And
these
it's
things.
also building a trust so that they're interested to give it to you. If you jump the wrong way, they're shutting down. They're shut. The door slammed. You're out.
I love it.
You have to open that window all the way. No shutters, no screen, no nothing.
I think that's right on target. I think it's right on target. And it's interesting. There's when Moshe was told by his father-in-law that he can't play 2 roles. He was playing the 2 most important roles within the Jewish people. When Yitro comes to him and tells him, you can't be a judge and a teacher. You have to be one or the other. You were meant to be the teacher, so stop being the judge and only be the judge after the whole system has been exhausted of the district judges and the local judges and federal judges and whatever, it was called in that context. And only when those are exhausted, let people come to you. But you need to address the Jewish people as a father, as their rabbi and teacher, as an educator. And Lisa, to your point, that means that it's all about the process. It's all about the patience. It's all about hearing it and the points we're mentioning. And doing that is the way an educator ideally carries himself and should think, as opposed to a judge. A judge, put the facts on the table, let me look at them, I want to adjudicate this thing, I want to finish it. The educator says, wait a second, there's a lifetime of an individual standing in front of me. And what I tell this person will have a dramatic impact on the rest of his life. So let me give it a lot of thought. Good. So to your point, Lisa, when people rush to throw advice at things, and again, we've all done it, right? We love to dispense advice, right? We love to. And if we could hear something and dump our wisdom on somebody in 10 seconds flat and walk away and think we did something or we know something, it's a good shot to the head. But as you mentioned very well, it's not responsible and it's not what the Torah is looking for. Patience, consideration, thinking, taking time to get back to the person, that's what we're looking for here. Good?
Alan has a saying, I mean, not to compare, not Lahavdil, but he said, once the toothpaste comes out, you can't put it back in.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, if we have an image like that in our minds, I think we'd all be more careful. Because you really can't get it back in. You really, truly can't, right? You're right? As far as I know.
Now we're all going to think about it.
Now we're all going to be thinking toothpaste.
That's right.
Right.
Ricky,
Rabbi
Be very
mentioned-
careful what we say.
Ricky, not everyone was here before, but you said you were going to tell us your text or what happened to you.
Yeah, I will. We got a couple more minutes, and then I'm going
Okay.
to put it together.
Just wanted to
Absolutely.
remind you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
The other point that that the rabbi makes, which is very important, is that if you haven't heard something from a very seriously reliable source, you cannot quote it as being fact. If there's something that you heard from a very, very real source, as reliable as, as reasonably possible, then you can present it that way. But if it's not from a very strong, reliable source, you must say that this is my spin on this, and this is my perspective. Now here again, now we're playing the other side of what we said in the very beginning. In the very beginning, we said, when an older person walks into the room, there should be blanket respect, and that person should do the overwhelming majority of the speaking. It's true. And to make that happen, silence on our behalf, because we're in many cases that more mature person in the room, is a way to ultimately bring about that level of reverence and respect. At the same time, the rabbi is saying, but listen carefully. When you do say something, make sure you're on firm ground. And I have to, as all of us are thinking right now, I'm sure, with the period in the world that we're living through now, it makes more sense maybe than at any time before in our lives, when there's crazy things going one way and the other way, and maybe this and possibly that, and everybody rushes out with a new this or a new that. Some of them are frightening, some of them are concerning, some of them are silly. But particularly at a time like this, if we really weigh the facts as best as possible, and when we do communicate something, it's communicated from a perspective of strong authenticity, great. And if it's not communicated from strong authenticity, the rabbi says that's okay. You can still communicate it, but just qualify it by saying so. That this is not scientifically proven, for example. That this is not a Torah concept. This is just what I'm thinking at the moment. The rabbi says you have to be honest enough and courageous, sincere enough to be able to say that. And finally, he says, and be modeh al ha'emet. What does that mean? If you made a mistake, if you took the wrong position, if you were off in your perspective, be modeh. Proclaim it, let people know it, and don't cover your tracks. Because when we cover our tracks, and we might try to cover our tracks with our children, with our partners, with our parents, whatever it might be, that's disingenuous. The rabbi says, don't cover your tracks. If you made a mistake, admit to it. Be modeh al ha'emet. So let's just recap quickly. The rabbi said there are different types of people. There's that person who's very crass and unfinished and almost not quite fully humanized. We don't know that guy. There's another type of person whose midot are excellent, knows very little Torah. There's another type of person whose midot are good and knows more Torah. And there's the last type of person whose midot, whose character traits are good, knows some Torah, and invariably attempts to go beyond Torah in his behavior between man and man to be an exemplary type of person. We don't even need to get to that. The rabbi says to get to that chacham position in terms of ben adam l'chavero, between man and man, I'll just quickly recap the following, and then I'll tell you the story that inspired this, and we'll wrap it up. He says, first of all, never speak in front of someone who has more knowledge or more years. That person should have the platform, and only when that person invites you to speak should you be speaking. Here again, not so easy, not our culture. We should try to bring this about in our families and our business situations. Don't cut a person off. Let a person complete his thought. When the thought is complete, don't even rush to answer. So it's another world from what we do. We rush to answer because we're thinking about the answer rather than listening to the question. We often interrupt the question midway, or we'll immediately speak when the question is ended because we've already formulated our thoughts, but we didn't have a chance to because we didn't take in the whole picture. So he says, don't interrupt, and in fact, don't be quick to respond. Don't be quick to respond. Take the time and answer appropriately. Next, he says that generally speaking, in most cases, in a serious conversation, there are questions embedded in other questions, embedded in other. Go to find the source question, the question based on which all the other questions are built. There's one most fundamental yearning, most fundamental searching that's being expressed by the other person. Find that, the core, the crux. Address that, even if it's the fourth question or the last question. Address that mentally first. Get it down, answer that. Let that create the foundation of insight and understanding, and then build from there. When doing so, only say things that are based in good, authentic, verifiable truth. And if they're not, then be clear to say that this is my opinion. And finally, if something is proven wrong, go and fess up and own up quickly. This was inspired by a conversation I had with someone who listened to our class, didn't attend the class, but listened to it. I'm going to tell you his 3 comments on the last class, and then I'm going to tell you who it is, and then I'm going to tell you the whole connection. Just we'll go another 5-6 minutes. He said that we were talking last time about judging. He said, you know, his perspective is that, of course, it's wrong to judge. We said last time, Al tadun et havercha ad shetagia lemkomo Meaning, don't judge a person until you've gone through all of what that person has gone through to get to where he is, which essentially means we can never judge anybody. We mentioned Birkat Hamazon last time, how it's the prayer of gratitude, how a person who trains himself to express gratitude will then become more blessed with more abundance, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's model is that when I express gratitude, when I have the ability to sincerely express gratitude, that opens my channel up to receive more shefa, more beauty, more pleasure, more success, and so on. His point was, put yourself always in a position where you're not looking for that abundance, where you're working and you're growing and you're doing, and what you receive is good, but you're truly working hard for it, okay? And the third point he said was, when he says, Poteach et yadecha, open up, when we turn to God and we say, open up your hands, God, and bless me and fill my hands. His perspective was, which I thought was nice as well, is that he looks at that when he says those words, he says, it's my left hand. With my left hand, I want to receive, and with my right hand, I want to give. Very nice. Now, when he mentioned these 3 points to me, he reminded me of the meetings we used to have in his father's backyard when we were 16 and 17 years old. Ezra Ashkenazi's father, Saul Ashkenazi, may he rest in peace, used to invite us to his backyard. Some of you may have been there as well. And we used to sit in a circle in chairs in the backyard, and he just used to share things with us. And he had, many of you probably remember him, you're all friendly. He had this very non-assuming way. And he would say very often, I don't remember the exact expression, but look at who I am giving advice. I'm a short guy from Mexico who doesn't even speak English all that well. Some of you may remember that. And what I remember most, what, Joe?
I remember clearly, and when he gave speeches, he gave it in speeches. He mentioned that, actually. That's where he started the speech. Like, who am I? I don't even speak English.
Right. So here it is, over 40 years later for me, inspired by a few comments that his son gave me, which were very nice comments. It took me back to those days. And I chose this Mishnah because we're all at a stage in our lives where we're sharing a lot with people. People are coming to us a lot for our advice and our guidance. All of us, I have no doubt. I have a pretty good sense of everybody on the screen. And I know you're sought after by people. And I know you offer your help and advice to people. And the points that we mentioned are very valuable and important. And I hope we all, I raise my hand first, can become more sensitive to some of the things that the rabbi mentioned. But if we can grab some of that Saul Ashkenazi thing, I remember a man who was really sameach b'chalko. He was just happy with his life. He felt good about life. He enjoyed where he was. And you know something? And I got to tell you, I mentioned this briefly in one of our other classes, as curious as it sounds. I am happier post-corona than I think I've been in my life up until this point. Crazy. With everything that's going on. With the craziness and the upside downness of the business world. And my world, like many of yours, was impacted very dramatically. But this whole tumult has brought me to a different place in terms of being happy with who I am, of valuing what I've done, of enjoying who I am. When you sat in Saul's backyard, he was having a good time because he was sameach bechalko. He was happy with his lot. He was comfortable in his skin. I have to say, for me, and I'm sharing with you on a very personal level, very openly, that this pandemic allowed me to get closer to myself, to understand my core values, to be more confident in who I am, more comfortable in my skin than I've ever been, because it stripped away all the outside stuff. And all we had was who we are. All we had is what we've built. And you know what? It's pretty fabulous. It's pretty fabulous. And if I can laugh and enjoy and be happy, and in my mind smile and say something like, look what I have. I didn't come from Mexico with an accent, but look how far I've come in my life. And look where I am. And if you can say that the way he did, then you can do the things we've spoken about in terms of listening and hearing and answering and thinking and introspecting. You can do all of that. So, Celia, thank you, Celia, for reminding me.
Of course.
That's what inspired it. I know you're all friendly, so I thought it was appropriate and okay to bring it up. I mentioned to Ezra that I would be telling you his comments. And most important, to the extent that we remember this man, great. To the extent that we don't, but you can visualize some of what I've described, great. But most important, let's all take a page out of the book of Ezehu Ashir Hasameach B'Chago. Who is the really happy person, the person who has a real sense of wealth in his or her life? The person who says, wow, life is great. And it is great. It is. They burn a store in the city. Guess what? It's still great. And when we hang on to that and we feel it and we own it, it becomes natural. We laugh easier. We listen better. We have a different energy and a different presence, and we're having a great time. So that's what I'm wishing for all of us, including
Thank you, Ricky.
all of us, myself first, and I hope for it for all of you as well. So,
Great,
Thank you.
Ricky.
questions?
Beautiful, Ricky. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much,
All righty.
Ricky. As always, thank
Ricky,
you.
Thank you.
Ricky, I had one
Thanks, Rick.
question. I had one question.
Question.
You bring up at the end that the inner peace can bring about being able to be more sensitive to other people. Do we have any? What does the Mishnah say about that? I'm sure it's got to say something about that.
That's exactly what it says. That's exactly what it says. That the person who's sameach b'choko, who's comfortable in his skin, who really appreciates what he has and what he's been giving. You know, one of the things we mentioned last week was, let's stop thinking about what we don't have, right? What does the Birkat Hamazon do? It puts a hard stop on thinking about what we don't have. And all it says is, say thank you for what you got. When we pray, when we dream, when we write our business plans, when we do all these things, all we're doing, not all, but a lot of what we're doing is thinking about what we don't have. The next stage, the next level, the next goal, the next, great. We should be doing it. We're growing. But let's give equal time to really celebrating what we do have. That's the Birkat Hamazon message. And that's what I think is what enables all this to be.
Right.
All right. Good to see
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ricky.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Good
was
thing.
unreal.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye,
That was great.